You know, we've heard a lot of outrage, a lot of anger and disappointment, but I have to tell you, after sitting here for a couple hours, I'm sad and I'm sick to my stomach that Americans could be targeted by a government agency based on their political beliefs. Mr. Miller, in response to Congressman Nunes, you mentioned that you had a discussion with Treasury, someone at Treasury, regarding the TICTA report. I was just wondering if you could give us more details about when that conversation occurred and with whom.
So I don't know the precise date, but it would have been very recently after the report was done. And I think Mr. George can speak to when he indicated to some parts of Treasury as well. It might have been in the same time frame.
So would that have been the first time you had a discussion with someone from Treasury about this situation?
This situation being the listing and the treatment of these cases?
Correct.
I think so.
So out of all of the news reports that have come out in the last couple years, there was never a discussion at IRS with Treasury about the situation until just recently?
You asked the question was the TIGTA report, and the TIGTA report was described and discussed with them recently. I don't believe the specifics were described or discussed with them earlier, but I don't know that. They weren't by me, I don't think.
Okay. Who was your conversation with?
I would have talked at some point to Mr. Patterson, the Chief of Staff, and subsequent to Mr. George's discussion with Mr. Wolin, I spoke to Mr. Wolin.
You spoke with whom?
Mr. Wolin. Mr.
Wolin?
Wolin.
And how did that conversation go? What did Treasury have to say?
We just talked through the troubling nature of the reports. I indicated that we had worked on fixing the problem, and that's what we talked about.
They didn't give you any advice and counsel on how to move forward?
No.
Okay. Mr. George, yes. How often do you meet with Treasury leadership and IRS leadership regarding open audits?
With the IRS leadership, we meet monthly with the commissioner or acting commissioner on a standing basis, and then we'll have communications as necessary. The secretary holds a monthly meeting with bureau heads, and in conjunction with those meetings, I meet monthly with the general counsel of the Department of the Treasury, and then on an as-needed basis with the Deputy Secretary, Mr. Wolin.
Okay. When did you first alert Treasury leadership and IRS leadership about this specific audit? I
alerted then Commissioner Shulman on May 30th, 2012. I subsequently alerted the General Counsel of the Department of the Treasury on June 4th, and subsequently, and I do not have the exact date, alerted the Deputy Secretary, Neil Wolin, about this matter. And then upon his assumption into the position, I mentioned it to Secretary Liu.
Okay, so May 30th would have been the first time that Mr. Shulman would have known about the troubling allegations.
From my perspective, I would assume that people within the Internal Revenue Service would have given him a heads up about this troubling matter, but I can't say that for certain.
Okay. In your report, you indicate that the decisions to target Americans based on political beliefs were made only within the IRS. How did you determine that?
These were through interviews with IRS staffers both in Cincinnati, Ohio, as well as in Washington, D.C. at the headquarters of the Determinations Unit and the Exempt Organizations Unit.
So did you interview Mr. Miller?
We did not interview Mr. Miller.
So how would you know, or did you interview anyone at Treasury?
We did not, and the reason for that is because at the time of our interviews, we had no indication because this was an ongoing matter, and we didn't have any indication from those initial interviews that they were implicated in this matter.
So had anyone given you any indication that you needed to visit with someone higher, you would have had the authority to do
Most
that?
definitely.
All right, time has expired. Mr. Paulson's